So Dennis, we're psyched to have you here. We're going to do these next two conversations. They're both going to be about 20 minutes each, and we're not going to do any audience Q&A, unfortunately, because all the people who came before us went long. And I'm filled with a little bit of rage about that, and on your behalf. So if you guys decide you want to do like Occupy Web 2.0, that would be like a good idea. Anybody wants to stage a protest, I can give you the address to Battel's house in Marin if you want to go occupy Battel, the Battel mansion too, for later on. It's all their fault if you're feeling bad. In any case, so Dennis, you are the co-founder, CEO, Foursquare. Not your first social media company. You did Dodgeball before this. You started this company in 2009. We're going to drill down on some more granular things as we go, but I want to start with a kind of basic thing, right? How many people have downloaded the app so far? Over 10 million?
Yeah, over 10 million is the number we've been giving out. I don't know how many actually downloaded the app. Those are accounts that we have right now.
So how many people are actually using the app as opposed to how many have downloaded it?
It depends how you measure it. Like, for a while we were measuring it as the number of people that were checking in on a given period, like a month or a week. And now we're starting to measure on the number of people that are opening the app. So we haven't been disclosing the numbers, but we're pretty satisfied with the results.
Right, but the numbers, like, there's a decent number of people who have downloaded the app but are not using it, right?
Yeah, I think it's true of any social site like that.
But did you see that as a problem? That there's a relatively sizable, though non-public gap between those two things? Does that tell you something about the fact that some number of people who are inclined to download the app are not finding it useful in their lives, and is that a problem for you as a business?
For us or for the space in general?
Well, take your pick. I mean, I was speaking directly to you. But
Well, I think it's the way that, like, anytime you build something, there's going to be people that sign up because they're curious, and like our challenge is to turn those users into active users. And I think every time that we we launch a new piece of functionality, we get to see that bump go up a little bit. So we do have that discrepancy. Not all of those users are using it on a regular basis, but we're pretty satisfied with the number of people that are using it on a regular basis to accomplish a whole bunch of different types of tasks.
So can you talk about what you've done to try to narrow that, to try to increase the utility of the product? Because I know for a lot of people, just anecdotally, I'm someone who's a big social media user.
Yep.
I fall squarely into that category.
Yeah.
I have downloaded the app 3 different times, yet I'm not a regular user of it because it's not totally clear to me why I should be.
Yeah, see, that doesn't stress me out too much because that's the experience that I had with Twitter too. I was super early on Twitter, and I kept coming back to it, and I couldn't find the thing that that would get me to stick around for a while. And then, maybe 18 months after they launched, it hit me, and I was like, oh, this is the thing. And I think we're kind of marching in that same direction with Foursquare. First it was all about the game dynamics, and it was about the specials for folks, and that got a lot of people to stick around. We started launching the Explore functionality, the recommendation engine. The more that you check in, the more we can tell you about what you want to do. And with the new functionality that we launched last week, the Foursquare Radar stuff, I think that's going to make some of the biggest difference because it's a way that you can participate in the ecosystem without actually having to remember to take out the app and use it. Like, it just knows what's going on in your life, and it can start pushing messages to you.
I want to talk about Radar more specifically in a second, but I'm curious about clearly at the beginning when you guys first launched, the notion of the game dynamic was like part of the way that you got people to be involved.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's something that's going to continue to be a major part of the product, of the experience, or is that something that as you guys grow and add functionality, that game dynamic that you guys were famous for is going to kind of fade in its importance?
It's still a big part of the product, and there's a lot of people that really love it. Like, anytime that we tweak the game mechanics, like, we hear positive comments and negative comments from users. It's a big part of the brand's personality. And personally, I'm a big believer in the idea of using game mechanics to help push people into different directions in real life. Like, how do you encourage people to do more interesting things? And I think we've taken a really solid stab at trying to solve that. As we've been growing so quickly, like, we never anticipated we'd be over 10 million users so quickly. So we've been focusing on other things like the recommendation engine, some of the merchant tools, like a lot of the radar stuff, because that's the direction we want to take the app eventually. And I think once those things start to stabilize, and like once we hit that point where Foursquare is very, very sticky the way we want it to be, then I think we start to go back and revisit some of the game mechanics.
Right. So talk about Radar. It's using the iOS 5 functionality, right? So talk about what that lets your users, either for those who are existing users, people might want to start using. What does it let me do?
Yeah, well, this is the stuff that we've been trying to build since grad school, since before grad school, and this is what we always thought Dodgeball would grow up to be. But it's it's an app that you can just, like, you download it, it's on your phone, you just turn it on. You don't really have to use it that often. You don't have to go in and remember to take it out. It's just by being on, you can kind of take into consideration all the different contextual triggers that are nearby, what direction I'm walking, what I've done in the past, what time of day it is, am I with anyone, and then use that information to buzz people's phones and let them know about things that are nearby. So in New York, for example, I remember leaving the office just last week, and I'm walking down the street, and I get this message like, oh, 6 of your friends happen to be 2 blocks away. And that's something that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. I wouldn't have known about if I was, unless I was checking the app. We can do the same stuff for recommendations, right? So we have a whole bunch of users that are using Foursquare to keep track of the places that they want to remember. There's a whole bunch of content sites that are creating lists of the best burgers, the best things to do in Austin, the best experiences to have in Paris. And once you put those things onto Foursquare, you can just walk around some of these cities, and Foursquare will buzz you and let you know when you can take advantage of those. And that's a big change, and I think a way that it's a big change in the way that we think of apps. I think one of the biggest hurdles that we have with Foursquare is that you have to think about using it. Whenever you walk into a Starbucks, you have to think about taking out your phone and checking in. And that's asking a lot of people. And so if we can lower that barrier, and we can also start pushing people interesting content about things that are nearby, then I think it's really going to juice the experience for a lot of folks.
Right. So it's sort of like making the app both kind of pervasive and ambient in a way.
Yeah. Well, that's what we've always wanted to do. It's like an app
automatic.
that you don't have to use. It's just on. It's letting you know about what's nearby.
And do you feel like that feature is it fully tuned? Are you guys happy with where you're at, or is it still a work in progress?
I can't be any happier that we got this thing out there. I've wanted to do this for so many years, and we finally push it out there. And it's kind of it's a little bit of an experiment in progress, right? So the stuff that's going on with iOS 5 with region monitoring, it's new. We couldn't do this stuff. We could do this stuff in the past, but it would drain your battery in 4 hours, right? And so what's new about the new Apple OS and some of the hardware that's in the 4S is it just allows us to run these things kind of all day long without killing your phone, right? Wait, what was it?
Work in progress.
The work in progress.
Or you feel like you're all the way there?
Well, we're hearing good things from some users, and we're hearing some negative things from others. Sometimes we send too many results, sometimes we don't send as many as we want to. So we're still in the process of tuning all of that stuff, and I think it's going to be an ongoing process.
So you guys took a very different approach to how to build this business to how Groupon did, right? Groupon went around and focused on building up its relationships with retailers and with businesses and with that side of things. Well, you guys built a user base, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of doing the basic utility of the products are sort of the same, but they went a totally different way. So do you feel happy with having gone with focusing not on the business side and focusing exclusively on trying to build a unique a big user base, a unique customer experience? Was that the right choice, or do you sometimes look at the way Groupon has grown and think, hey, I wish we'd gone that way, I wish we'd done more of that? They now are in a position that they've created real barriers to us being able to build the kind of business we want to build.
Yeah, it's first of all, I wouldn't say that the products are the same. I think what we're trying to do is a lot more. It's a lot more technically challenging. It's a lot more ambitious in different ways. And we're a product-oriented company. I'm a product person. That's the stuff I've been doing forever. The company itself has a very product feel type of personality. And so, we're in this game just so we can build the things that we don't think anyone else is going to build. Radar is that, Explorer is that, and that's the stuff that we really want to do. We just want to build interesting product. As the product gets better, the user base gets bigger. As the user base gets bigger, we can start to think about different ways to monetize. But, the things that we want to build are these tools that change the way that everyone in this room experiences the real world. And, it's our thinking that if we can make those tools, really, really amazing, then the rest of the journey is going to be a little bit easier.
I mean, it also seems like there's kind of a calculated bet involved, right? That the notion that, for restaurant owners, for instance, they'll go where the users are, rather than the users following the restaurant owners that are on a certain service. That the opposite dynamic will ultimately work to your advantage.
Yep.
Right? And do you see evidence that that's the case, or again, to get to the specific thing, forget about you went the way you wanted to go, you're comfortable with the way you wanted to go.
Yeah.
Has Groupon built in building the business they've built, have they created a situation that's made your life difficult and created an obstacle, a hurdle that you have to get over, and that's a problem for you?
Yeah, it's the question of whether the companies are competitive or kind of complementary. And I don't know we have the full answer to that yet. What I do know is that a lot of local merchants, they were spending whatever ad dollars they had on, on newspaper ads or maybe yellow page ads. They weren't terribly effective. And then here comes Groupon saying, hey, local merchants, you can use the internet to actually drive new customers. And whether that's successful long-term for Groupon or for Living Social, like the bigger part of it is who knows how many merchants that they've contacted, but they're teaching an army of local merchants that, hey, there are better tools out there. Groupon is one of them, Living Social is another one, and Foursquare is going to be one of them too. So it makes our job in selling the tools that we're building a little bit easier just because they're kind of warmed up into the fact that you can use the internet to drive customers.
Now you guys have really started focusing on building tools for brands and for businesses now in a way that you hadn't previously. Talk about that. What does that entail?
Yeah, so I think one of the best things that we did as a company early on is that as much as we were focused on building stuff for products, like we realized early on that merchants wanted to participate in the ecosystem as well. And instead of just punting it and being like, oh, that's our monetization strategy, we'll get back to it when we have 20 million users, we kind of embraced it. And we built, for every 3 things that we would do for an end user, we would do something for a merchant. And I think the merchants have been along for the ride. Like they've been offering mayor specials and check-in specials, and they've been putting all this content that's into Foursquare. It's actually encouraging users to check in more often. And I think that's one of the cool parts of the ecosystem. Like as the monetization plans start to become a little bit more formalized, and as we get more merchants participating, the product gets better. People are getting more deals. And now there's a whole subset of Foursquare users that, they don't use it for the game dynamics, but they use it specifically to get deals from merchants, specifically to get special treatment from these places. And I think it's a really important thing that's going on. I'm really glad that we focused in that direction early on in the company's life.
Yeah. You guys have been in this position that any self-respecting startup fears more than anything else, which is to have both the 2 huge, enormous companies in Google and Facebook, not just trying to compete with you, but ripping off everything you're doing on almost a daily basis in a very direct way.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? I mean, they have these user bases that are vast compared to even to your healthy. You have a very healthy user base. They have much healthier user bases, and they have tons of engineers, and they have a lot of money, and they have all the things they have. So does that just scare the shit out of you? How do you deal? How do you deal with that on a daily basis?
It's one of the more challenging things to deal with. Like to know that, when Facebook was going to launch Places last year, that's a big moment for the company. Like what are we going to do about this? Are either going to kill us, or we're going to sit there and we're going to focus on doing what we do best, and we're going to survive this. And I think because we had that specific focus, and because we have a very narrow focus on building things that help people experience the real world, and our whole company is kind of aligned by that. By separating ourselves there, we've just been able to kind of hold them off a little bit. So it's definitely, it is stressful, but looking at how we're able to survive the Facebook onslaught, that's a big motivating thing for the company in general.
So what have when you look at the offerings that they've done that have been directly competitive with yours, offer your assessment of how well they've done.
I think they're doing great stuff. I use Facebook all the time. I'm sure a lot of people do here as well. I'm just not I'm not a believer of they are going to do everything on the internet as best, better than anyone else can possibly do, right? And I think they've nailed their niche, which is they're helping people communicate and share things online, and that's what they're really good at. And we've kind of found our niche, which is helping people connect with places offline, places and experiences offline. And I think just because we can focus specifically and solely on that, that gives us an advantage. Those are the only things that we're worried about, and they've got all these existing other use cases that they have to continue to support.
So you're the ultimate power user of your service, right? I mean, you are a very personally identified with the service. You are out late a lot, going to a lot of places, and people know where you are. Was that a tactic that you adopted as a way of building the brand, or is that just you're living your life and this is a tool that you wanted to use and so you use it and so be it?
Yeah, that's always been what it is. That's what Dodgeball was. Dodgeball was a tool that we built when our friends got laid off because we wanted to know where they were hanging out in the afternoons. Now they didn't have jobs. And Dodgeball turned into something much bigger, and we started seeing all the data that was going into Dodgeball, being wow, we can do all this interesting stuff with recommendations. And then once we started working on it again with Foursquare, we just continued to see these opportunities. It's funny, people ask me this all the time. It's well, how do you come up with the killer idea for a startup? I'm well, the way to do it isn't to sit down at a whiteboard and to identify the best market opportunities. That's not the way that we did it. We just built things that we want to build. The stuff that we're building now is the stuff that we want to be using a year from now.
Now, if I were one of your investors, I would see the way that you use the product, and I would look at and see you checking in at such and such a bar at 1 a.m. and another nightclub at 3 a.m. and another bar at 5 a.m. And I'd say, God, it's great that Dennis uses the product this much, but I'm not sure that I necessarily want my CEO burning the candle at all 4 ends. How many of your investors have questioned some of your social proclivities as they are manifest on the service.
If you tracked my check-in history, like over time, you'd see a lot of the late night ones have gone away, just because it's become a lot more demanding to continue to run the company at this scale.
You guys are growing like crazy. Do you want to talk a little bit about your growth, your global growth? You're just opening up an office in Europe for the first time, I think. In the last
we got
week.
one guy that's in Europe. We're looking for a desk for him now, and we're sure that's going to grow into like a much larger thing. I mean, that's how it started here in San Francisco. Like, we were bumming desks from Jack at Square for our 2 biz dev guys, and now we've got 15 guys working around the corner, and we can't hire people fast enough. We started at my kitchen table in New York, and then we eventually ended up with an office with a table, which is great. And now we're busting the seams on our second office, and we're looking for additional office space. So.
Is there a way in which the way in which the service, are there not just lessons you've learned? Obviously, there are lessons you've learned from what you've done here that will apply as you start to build out on a more global basis. But is there any kind of synergy between those businesses, or you just have to take it market by market as you roll out across the world?
Between what
Between the U.S. and between doing this in the U.S. and doing it everywhere else.
Oh, it's interesting. Like, when we first launched, we just targeted a couple like 5 cities across the U.S. and we blew it out to be all the U.S. And then it was a big hurdle to get over and drop it in Europe. And one of the things that we've seen is that Foursquare usage, it's not really that different if it's in the U.S. or if it's in Europe or if it's in Asia. About 50% of the usage is actually outside of the U.S., so it's like a huge global market opportunity for us. And like the reason we just didn't drop people in Europe earlier is like it's hard to manage that, and sometimes you can get a little bit ahead of yourself. Now that we've got the San Francisco office relatively stable and it's kind of humming on its own, it's like, all right, well, we've got all these requests that we have to deal with in Europe. Like, that's the next location to start putting people on the ground.
A year from now, you'll still be an independent company, yes or no?
I think so. I think we're doing stuff that no one else is doing, and like the bigger we get, like the bigger the opportunities starts to become to us.
Well, and the bigger the offers for acquisition. So, do you feel like it's important to stay? I mean, is it a priority to you to stay independent? There are companies that have obviously turned down big acquisition offers. You guys are obviously a tempting target.
Yeah.
Some companies in the past have resisted that. Others have said, hey, perfectly happy to get bought.
The only thing that we want to do is build the product the way that we want to do it. Like, if we do it independently, that's great. If we do it as part of another company, that's another thing. But like, that's all we want to do is get the product to where we think it should be 3 years from now. That's the thing that's most satisfying to us. The thing is, I've never been a part of a company that is running as fast as we are. We're launching new big features like every 3 or 4 weeks. It's kind of nuts. And every time we do that, more of the puzzle pieces start to fit together, and you can just see how this thing is going to look a year from now, or I can see how it's going to look from now, and it's just it's going to be a huge opportunity for us.
This is the moment in which I would normally turn to the audience, as I said before, and ask them for their questions, which would have certainly been better than mine. But because of the fascists back there, I can't do that. So we'll just have to say thank you very much for coming in. Everybody give Dennis a hand, and we'll have our next.
Thank you. It's a quick 15 minutes.
He's around if you want to talk to him. He's around.